RTA Organizational Services and Performance Monitoring Committee. Roll call, please.
Mayor Biassiata.
Here.
Ms. Welch.
Here.
Ms. McPherson. Ms. Pachetti.
Here.
And Mr. Sleesman.
Here.
We have 4 committee members present. You have a quorum.
Wonderful. We have 2 items on today's agenda. We have a state contract for the procurement of a cooperative purchasing program and interagency agreement with our Easy Fare mobile ticket agency. Up first, we're going to have the details on our competitive procurement program, State of Ohio purchasing program to provide authority-wide fire protection services for a period of 5 years. Mr. Brown and Ms. Prebish will be our speakers today. Mr. Brown, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Mayor Biassiata, committee members, and members of the board. My name is Charles Brown. I am the Security Systems Manager for RTA for the past 14 and a half years. I manage the fire life systems, the fire and security systems from design, installation, inspection, maintenance, and repairs, mobile cameras trains on our trains and buses, fixed cameras on our buildings, access control, burglar alarms, cyber locks on all our fare boxes, key issuing, key control, and our 911 call boxes, just to name a few. Today, I'm here to present the Fire Alarm and Safety System Inspection Maintenance Service. The National Fire Protection Agency, NFPA, requires us to conduct semi-annual inspections on suppression systems, annual inspections on fire alarm panels and peripherals, annual inspections on extinguishers, annual inspections on backflow prevention systems, quarterly inspections on sprinkler systems, 5-year internal sprinkler system inspection on all sprinkler and suppression systems. These are a few of the systems we basically test: our riser suppression panel, the 4100U, the backflows, our water flows, and a common smoke detector system with pull stations. The scope of work is fire alarm control panels, testing the common alarm functions, fuses, lamps, and LEDs, primary and secondary power supplies, interfaced equipment reporting alarms to the transit police dispatch and our integrated communication center. Output controls for required shutdown of equipment associated with special hazard systems, example, our FM200 and Halon systems. The sprinkler system conducts a visual inspection of all of our sprinkler heads as required by the NFPA, activation of all water flow switches with actual flow of water, activation of our tamper switches, backflow prevention inspections, wet and dry standpipe inspections, and pressure testing as NFPA required. We also test the fire pumps inspection and flow testing, testing and interface points of the fire alarm system, jockey pumps and compressor inspections, activation of all interlocks and valves, and visual inspections of internal piping system. The fire alarm peripherals include visual inspections of devices to ensure that they are mechanically secure, activation and testing of all initiating devices, activation and testing of all notification devices, sensitivity check on all of our smoke detectors as required by NFPA. Transit police access a proprietary central station for GCRTA pursuant to NFPA sections 5.3. To achieve this requirement, GCRTA has integrated the life safety system, which has approximately 1,350 HID proximity readers and supports over 3,000 cardholders. It also integrates 1,300 plus CCTV cameras and web client remote access. I'm going to turn this over to Anne Marie from procurement to finish this.
Thank you so much. Good job. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Anne Marie Prebish, and I am the contract administrator for this procurement. Section 306.43H4 of the Ohio Revised Code provides political subdivisions within the state of Ohio the opportunity to participate in contracts executed by the state of Ohio Department of Administrative Services. Johnson Controls has manufactured, maintained, inspected, and supported all life safety and security systems installed at GCRTA for over the past 25 years. A significant portion of the system's parts are proprietary and can only be obtained from Johnson Controls. The fire alarm, life safety system testing service, and preventative maintenance for the authority will be performed by Johnson Controls Fire Protection, LP, through the State of Ohio Department of Administrative Services Cooperative Purchasing Program under state contract number OT 903221. This contract is a result of a competitive solicitation. And this slide shows the project cost breakdown. So the 3-year base terms with option year 1 and 2, so for a total of 5 years, lists the terms and the maintenance contract amount, as well as the service repairs. Those are not to exceed amounts. And then the 3-year total not to exceed is the $687,117.36. And if we exercise both option years, the 5-year total not to exceed would be $1,165,195.60. The recommendation, staff requests that the Organizational Services and Performance Monitoring Committee recommend award to Johnson Controls Fire Protection, LP for the fire alarm life safety system testing service and preventative maintenance contract in an amount not to exceed $687,117.36 for the base 3 years, and in an amount not to exceed $229,039.12 for option year 1, and in an amount not to exceed $249,039.12 for option year 2, for a total contract amount not to exceed $1,165,195.60 for a 5-year period. And we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
And any questions from the committee? The board as a whole? Wonderful. Mayor?
Just curious, could you go back to the pricing?
Of course.
If I'm looking at this quickly, I was pleased to see the pricing held steady for all 5 years, and the service repair charge did as well until the second option year. Was there something special about that year that?
Yes, so we're required to do additional testing every 5 years.
Okay, got
So
it.
it costs a little bit more.
Thank you.
Another interesting thing to note on the service repair, it's like amount not to exceed. If we don't need the service, we won't spend the $95,000. I
Yes,
understand
sir.
correctly?
That is correct. So it could come in lower than those amounts listed.
Very good. Hearing no further questions, I move to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, aye. Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. Excuse me, sorry. We're moving on to our next agenda item. We'll have a presentation for the renewal of our Easy Fare mobile ticketing and scalable fare payment solution for a period of 2 years. Presenters will be Mr. Miranda and Mr. Becker.
Good morning, Chairman Biassiata, committee members, and members of the board. My name is Josh Miranda. I'm the Director of Management Information Services, and this morning we're going to talk about the Easy Fare service renewal. So Easy Fare is a fare media ticketing option. On the display there, we're looking at the far right-hand side. This is the digital platform where individuals can purchase tickets to utilize our services. The road to Easy Fare, clear policy direction via 2019 Fare Equity Study, 2020 Strategic Planning, and the Code Book 842.09. In 2022, GCRTA utilized a cooperative purchasing agreement with NeoRide for fixed pricing on digital fare ticketing solution. Easy Fare is comprised of 15 transit systems throughout Ohio, creating a regional ticketing system. Users purchase digital fare media via an app and use scanners located on bus, rail, and bus rapid transit vehicles. That's a picture of the validator in the corner. Easy Fare overview. In 2022, we did $2.7 million over a 5-month period. 2023, 7.66 million, and in 2024 year-to-date, we are 2.77 million at the end of March. Most purchased fare media is One Trip, Bus, Rapid, BRT, and we have approximately 174,000 unique accounts. The revenue by payment collection, so this is 2018 through 2024. In 2018 through the front end of 2022, we were utilizing a different platform known as Passport. Passport went end of life, and so we cut over to the EasyFare product in 2022. And as you can see, we've grown our revenue there for the last 3 years. We expect in 24 it will grow as well, but that's based off of a projection number. This is the pricing affiliated with using the service. So in the center column is the current structure of the agreement. Moving forward in the future contract, they broke that 7.5 out and called out the two different parts. So we have 5.9% for credit card and 1.5 to the revenue sharing, which goes to Masabi. So in all of those categories, we went down, which is a good thing, except for the first category, we went up by 0.1%. I'm going to turn it over to Sean Becker for the procurement.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor Biassiata, committee members and members of the board. I'm Sean Becker, Program Contract Manager in Procurement, and responsible for this procurement. So this is an interagency agreement through NeoRide with Masabi LLC, and per revised code, section 306.43H4 provides that competitive bidding is not required when an expenditure is made from another political subdivision, public agency, public transit system, regional transit authority, the state, or the federal government, or as a beneficiary under the state or federal procurement contract, or as a participant in a Department of Administrative Services contract under section 125.04B of the Ohio Revised Code. So GCRTA, we received a proposal on April 4th of this year. That proposal was reviewed and discussed by representatives of Management Information Systems and Procurement. The NeoRide Council of Governments, GCRTA joined that in 2019, and that's comprised of 15 NeoRide agencies across Ohio, Michigan, and Kentucky that participate in the consortium called EasyFare. So the agencies around GCRTA that participate are Lake Tran, SARTA, PARTA, Medina County, and Akron Metro. And a little bit about Masabi's experience. They launched the first ever UK mobile ticketing application with Chiltern Railways in 2007. They launched the first ever deployment of a US transit agency in 2012 with their fare payment as a service platform, Just Ride. They serve over 250 agencies, over 4 continents, and 80 mobile ticketing as a service deployments in 5 countries. Their transit experience includes Lake Tran, SARTA, SORTA, PARTA, Medina County Public Transit, Akron Metro, MTA, Boston MBTA, Los Angeles Metrolink, Southern Nevada's RTC, Colorado RTD, among many others, including GCRTA. And our recommendation is that staff requests that the Organizational Services and Performance Monitoring Committee recommend an award to Masabi LLC to provide EasyFare mobile ticketing solution services in a total contract amount not to exceed $1,200,000 for the 2-year term. And at this point, we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions?
Yeah, I had a couple questions written down. I'll ask them at the same time because I think they go together. Smart cards and fare capping, I know are on the agenda at some point, and they will require, and this is the real question then, that validators be more widely installed. So basically, that's the question. How are we doing on installing validators, both on vehicles and including that Tower City gate that always seems to trip people up?
So we are still working with Masabi to get those units installed. We have the units available to us in the next month to validate that we're going to be able to perform at Tower City. So we have to put that through a user acceptance testing before we put it into production. But we have deployed those validators throughout the authority with the limitation of the rail. We have the equipment, but we had to have specialized units built based on some requirements to be out in the rail environment. So the plastics had to be recreated because of a burn rating concern. We now have those units, and they're being installed currently.
Great, thanks.
Sure.
Any further questions from the board?
Do you mind going back to the table of fees slide?
Which one?
The one that had the percentages per transaction. So I'm curious, I know when you're in the EasyFare app or Transit app, you can purchase multiple tickets per transaction or kind of buy one at a time. Do the fees apply, like credit card fees per transaction or per fare purchased?
They apply per transaction, so that's a flat fee. So whether you buy one ticket or 50 tickets, it would be the same rate.
Okay, and RTA is essentially covering that fee for users, because I know I don't pay more than
We
the
absorb that
ticket
cost.
piece. I was also wondering about the procurement as this compares to the transit app. So I know that EasyFare has its own kind of mobile app that you can use. Many people probably access EasyFare as a insertion into the transit app. Do we have a procurement process around transit also, or can you speak to how those two things?
We have participated with Transit Royale through NeoRide as well. We're currently engaged with Transit ourselves to kind of go on a standalone just strictly between GCRTA and Transit. So that is in process and probably will come out in the near future.
Okay, but this piece covers both EasyFare straight up through the EasyFare app as well as the access through Transit.
Correct.
Thank you. My final question is going back to what Trustee Sleesman raised just around the future potential for smart cards. Is that still something that we think we're interested in? Are we moving more to just a mobile-based or paper-based ticketing? I don't know if anyone can speak to kind of the future outlook of that.
Yeah, so I think there's still an interest, but it's imperative we have all the equipment deployed in the field before we would go down that path. So we want to make sure the equipment's available, and then we want to make sure that the software meets all the expectations before we offer it to the public.
Just to piggyback on that, just to make sure, and thank you for the answer, I think that's accurate, but just to make sure I understand the crux of the question, kind of what's the future state of ticketing? Is that, so we are looking at the fare capping initiative, as was mentioned before. We want to make sure that we're prepared to be able to install it and implement it in a way that's equitable. So we've got to look at every part of our service, right? The rail, the paratransit, the bus, trolley, all of that, and making sure that we do that in a way that's equitable, that meets all of our Title VI, 7, all of the unbanked as well, and making sure that you can kind of get a bang for your buck when you actually do purchase a ticket. As far as the electronic fare media, we always have that conversation where we have to make sure that the unbanked have the opportunity to be able to also purchase fare media, even if it's through cash. There has been a huge national kind of push to be able to go toward electronic only. There are a couple systems in the nation that have done that. However, there have been a lot of behind the scene work, especially on the tech side. This is just the beginning of us trying to kind of lay the foundation for that. You also have to look at the demographics of the city that you're serving and the urban population versus rural, banked, unbanked. As we all know, Cleveland has a little bit of a sticking point with the unhoused right now, especially those that are unemployed in certain regions that do take our service. So we want to make sure that we don't kind of make it a disparate sort of implementation. So I would imagine within, say, the next 12 months, we'll be coming back to the board with future work on how we're going to be able to implement that kind of program. But this lays the foundation to make sure we have the infrastructure there first.
Thank you. So is it fair to say that the smart card would kind of be in parallel with the electronic payment to make fare capping accessible for riders that have smartphones and don't have smartphones?
Correct. And ideally, you want to come away from a smart card. You know, that's almost the older technology that's been around for about a decade. So ideally, we want to be able to kind of tap, go, hit it on your mobile app and keep it moving, so to speak. The smart card is really just kind of a step into that process, but we will be able to kind of step away from that completely at some point.
And for these validators that you're going to be installing, is that at all the transit lines as well?
Correct.
Wonderful. Good questions. Question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have two follow-ups, and I apologize if you address them. So one was on the timing. I understand the validators will arrive in a month and there's going to be time needed for testing, just estimated time that you think people will be able to use them if everything goes according to plan?
Sure. So I think we're targeting in the next 12 months to come back to you because we have to talk about fare structure and strategy, make sure everybody's in agreement that this is going to meet the needs, and then we'll move out with a full deployment.
And then I didn't quite catch the relationship between the two apps. So if you could just like back up a second and talk just for background, what is the difference, trade-offs between the transit app and then the Easy Fare and what the relationship is between them?
So the Easy Fare product is Masabi is the technology partner. Easy Fare belongs to NeoRide. So it's a proprietary brand that we've partnered into. Okay, so Masabi has the Just Ride platform, which is what others are using. We're using the Easy Fare. Transit is another app that allows you to use things beyond just riding buses. So you could use other vehicles, Ubers and Lyfts, and so that's the value of transit. But those are two separate accounts. So if you've created an account in Easy Fare and you're trying to get to fare capping, you'd have to stay in Easy Fare. And if you've created an account in transit, you'd have to stay in transit. So it's really the rider's preference, what they use beyond that service. And so they have to make a decision.
Super helpful. Thank
Sure,
you.
no problem.
Wonderful, good program.
If I could just tag on to Ms. Garpichetti's question about timing. When is our projected time of having the validators installed in Tower City? And then to tag on to Mayor Kumar's question, will they also be at other rail stations where we don't currently do fare checks, or is that not part of the installation plan?
That is part of the installation plan. The units at Tower City, they're currently working on them. So they have the components that they need. They have to verify it's going to work. So there's some nuance between leaving one rail and going on to another, and we have some things with passback that don't allow you to tap within a period of time. So there's some constraints we have to overcome there, but the technology is now in place. We just have to finish the testing. So I think Mr. Lively and team have a few additional units to install, but we're going to go into testing very shortly. So I think that the 12-month timeline is still what we're holding to, is ideally that's when we'll be able to move forward.
Any follow-up questions?
Quick follow-up comment. Just so the conversations around fare structure are not the bottleneck, we should probably have those soon so that when the hardware is ready to go, the policy and rollout can just all be set and planned and everything.
Yeah, that, if I could
Yeah.
comment on, yeah, that's definitely part of the plan. We want to make sure the infrastructure is there before we start to put the cart before the horse. But we will have to have conversations about budget, about equity, about a lot of different things. It'll take us, I don't want to pinpoint it on a month, but it's going to take us a while to be able to get that in the near future, of course. But we would come to the board and be able to lay out all of that. It's probably going to take more than a few meetings, but we'll definitely get that into play once we have confidence of the mechanisms to do the work.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Any further questions, comments? Wonderful. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second, Pachetti.
All in favor, aye? Aye. Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you, gentlemen. I now move to adjourn RTA Organizational Service and Performance Monitoring Committee at 9:24. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Committee is adjourned.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I now want to call to order the Operational Planning and Infrastructure Committee meeting. Teresa, roll call.
Ms. Welch,
Here.
Mr. Love,
Here.
and Mr. Sleesman.
Yep.
You have 3 committee members present. You have a quorum.
We have 2 items on the agenda today, and then we are going to go into a public hearing. We're going to start off with an IFB procurement, which is a presentation of the competitive procurement for repairs to the main office building parking garage. The presenters today are going to be Grant Kirsch, which is with the Construction Engineering Department, and then Anne Marie Privish, who is the Contract Administrator for Procurement. You now have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Welch, committee members, and members of the board. My name is Grant Kirsch. I'm a construction engineer here at the RTA, and I will be presenting on the main office building parking garage project. So the parking garage is located at 701 West Lakeside Avenue here in Cleveland, Ohio. RTA owns the lower level of this garage, beginning with the top of the ramp. And that photo on the right, that's the entrance to the garage off Lakeside Avenue. If you pulled in there, you'd see that there's work currently going on the first floor and the floors above it. This is separate from RTA. This is through the Pinnacle owners. Here are some photos of the existing conditions. That photo on the left, that's a typical spa location with exposed rebar. That center photo is a drainage photo. And you can see right in the center there on that PVC pipe, there's some rust water staining. That's ultimately dripping onto cars below, so that's something we'll fix as well. And then finally, that photo on the right, that's a concrete beam on the west side of the garage. Also has pretty significant spalling and exposed rebar. And these photos don't look great, but it is structurally sound and is safe to use still. The goal of this project is to extend the service life of the parking garage, and we will do this through patching areas throughout the basement ceiling, patching areas of the ramp and applying a new wearing surface, and replacing metal drain assemblies with PVC components. I will now turn it over to Anne Marie from procurement.
Good morning. My name is Anne Marie Prebish, and I'm the contract administrator for this procurement. The invitation for bid was issued February 25th, 2024. It was accessed on our website by 29 interested parties. One firm submitted a bid. The lowest responsive and responsible vendor is Jadco Construction Services, Inc. There was an 11% DBE participation goal assigned to this project. Jadco will meet this goal by utilizing Brush Striping LLC, Artistic Rock, and all contractors supply. Some of Jadco's client base includes ODOT, AECom Parking Facility, the City of Lyndhurst, John Carroll University, the City of Akron, and GCRTA, among others. In our recommendation, the staff requests that the Operational Planning and Infrastructure Committee recommend award to Jadco Construction Services, Inc. for the main office building garage repairs. The contract is in an amount not to exceed $423,000. And we are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Just a quick question, just from an infrastructure standpoint. What's the relationship with the leasing or owning? I know we use it exclusively, but how does that work as far as, do we own that bottom part? Do we lease that part? What is the relationship between Pinnacle and us as far as who owns that garage?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we own the basement level. Okay. Like I said, beginning with the top of the ramp and everything below that.
If we have additional info, thank you, appreciate that. Mike, if you want to weigh in for a moment, we discussed this. We figured this might come up in conversation.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a condominium type arrangement where we own the bottom and they own the floors on top of us. We do have some common maintenance fees that we pay every year, and certainly the work that Pinnacle is doing is kind of above and beyond that. For their part of the garage, the work that we're doing down below is above and beyond that condo maintenance agreement. So, but it's more like a condo type setup.
And additionally, if there are, because those are pretty bad leaks there, if there are some issues that are coming from Pinnacle, I mean, how is that kind of sorted out as far as what we pay versus what they pay? If maybe sometimes the issues are coming, I'm not saying these issues are specifically coming from Pinnacle, but if there are issues that arise, are we solely responsible for that, or is there a good working relationship where they will come in and?
We do have a long-standing relationship, and over the years there's been lots of discussion about who's paying for what. But for this one, this is definitely ours, and we are certainly happy they're doing the work above. And we fully expect there's some additional work on the first floor they'll do that will tie in with what we're doing below. So the garage, I think this is the most activity we've seen out of Pinnacle on the garage in the last 20 years. We had a project a couple years ago, but they've really been active in trying to get their part of the garage, up to a state of good repair.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Mayor Wise.
Just one quick question. And I know this relates to Pinnacle because it's on the first floor, but is the work that both Pinnacle and we are doing, is it just the leaking issue or is it other structural changes going on the first floor?
I mean, a lot of what we're doing, again, the building, this building is structurally sound. I mean, it is, whatever. We don't build buildings now like we did 100 years ago. And but from the drainage issues are really the big compounding piece of this right now. And Grant's project will really address that so that we have a control of the water, which is really leading to salt intrusion and some other things. So this project will take care of a lot of it, and the work that they're doing on top of us will also take care of a lot of the issues.
But in terms of actual accessibility to either the basement or the first floor and above, that's not really going to change? Is that a fair?
I'm not sure if I'm understanding your question.
Just maneuvering around, I think we probably all know those challenges.
Oh, yes.
So that's not being addressed at this point.
No, it is a challenging, the one way in and out when you make a left in there. That was a result of work they had to do for an actual structural fix that they did last year. And so we're still going to have that one way in and out situation.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Do I have a motion to move this to the full board?
Motion. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the ayes will carry. Thank you so much for that presentation.
Thanks.
Next, we'll move into a presentation on the capital improvement plan, which is a discussion on the proposed FY 2025 through 2029 capital improvement plan. We're going to have presenter Carolyn Young, who's the manager of budgets, and Mike Shipper, DGM for engineering project management. You may now have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, Mrs. Welch, committee members, and officers of the board. Today we are here to present the 2025 to 2029 proposed capital improvement plan. The presentation will be given by me, Carolyn Young. I am the manager in the Office of Management and Budget, and Michael Shipper, who is the Deputy General Manager of Engineering and Project Management. During today's presentation, we'll cover the following items. The Capital Improvement Fund. I will highlight the two funds that make up the capital program. We'll give an overview of the capital planning committees and their responsibilities. We'll go over the planning schedule. We'll also highlight the criteria that is utilized to score the various projects. We'll present the proposed capital budget and the 5-year capital plan. We'll also talk about the sources of funding that finance our capital projects. Mike will then highlight the fiscal 2025 capital projects that are being proposed today. The unfunded project list, he will give an update on that as well, and then we'll request to enter a public hearing. In order for capital projects to be included into the capital plan, the asset must be at least $5,000 or more and have a useful life of at least 1 year. Capital improvement funds are used to account for construction and acquisitions of properties and for the purchases of equipment and vehicles. The Capital Improvement Fund has 2 associated fund accounts. Projects that are requested through the RTA Capital Fund are 100% locally funded projects. These projects are smaller and more routine in nature. Projects that are supported through this fund are generally less than $250,000, and has a useful life of 5 years. Projects that are funded through the RTA Development Fund are larger in scope, greater than $250,000, and have a useful life greater than 5 years. The majority of the projects that are sourced through the Development Fund are grant funded with local match. There's 2 committees that review and evaluate the submitted capital request. The Capital Program Working Group, which is known as CPWG, has 12 committee members consisting of managers and directors from various departments. CPWG is responsible for reviewing project submissions and prioritizing projects based on shovel readiness and scoring projects based on 6 ranking criteria that we'll discuss later in the presentation. The Capital Oversight Committee, known as CPOC, has 8 members. This committee is the executive management team, which consists of the CEO, the Deputy General Manager, and internal audit. This committee will review CPWG recommendation, assess how projects are aligned with the current strategic plan, make final decisions based on funding availability and return on investments. The capital planning process began last year in September. In January and February, the projects that were submitted were reviewed by the Office of Management and Budget and the Capital Program Working Group, utilizing the 6 ranking criteria for scoring. Once projects were scored, recommendations were moved to the Capital Oversight Committee for their review. During the month of March and April, CPOC reviews CPWG recommendation and finalized the capital project selection based on CPWG recommendation, funding availability, strategic plan, and return on investments. We are here today in May presenting the proposed fiscal 2025 capital budget and the 5-year capital improvement plan to the Operational Planning and Infrastructure Committee. At the end of the presentation, we'll request for a public hearing to allow for public comments. After the public comments, we will make recommendations or will request to propose 2025 capital improvement plan budget to be moved to the full board for approval on May 21st. Once the Board of Trustees have approved the capital improvement plan, in June, we will submit our 5-year capital improvement plan to NOACA for review and approval. Competing projects were ranked based on the 6 criteria you see listed here, with state of good repair, health and safety, and government mandates being the top 3 weighted criteria. Even though the other 3 categories are assessed at a lower percentage, they are equally important to the scoring process. Ridership is scored based on how the requested projects will affect customer service and increase in revenue and ridership. Under operating impact, members examine how the project may reduce operating expense to the general fund budget. And for environmental impact, the authority continues to explore funding opportunities that will support environmental savings in air quality, technology integration, and energy saving programs. The proposed 2025 capital improvement plan budget totals $165.9 million. Projects are budgeted in 9 categories you see listed here. The following category budget has been identified. $0 for bus garages. This category is for garage improvements and system upgrades. $23.1 million for bus improvement for ongoing bus purchases. $12.1 million for equipment and vehicles. This category is for non-revenue vehicle replacement, information technology upgrades, and small routine purchases. $14.6 million for facility improvements, such as bridge rehabilitation, HVAC, roofing, and paving repairs. $33.7 million for other projects, such as planning studies, project contingency, and currently the Metro Health bus line design and construction. $1.7 million for preventive maintenance and operating reimbursements. $32.7 million for rail car replacement program. This is for our heavy and light rail vehicle purchases and rail infrastructure modifications. $47.7 million for rail projects such as track rehabilitation, station upgrades, substations, and signal reconstruction. $300,000 for transit centers and ADA enhancements. The 5-year proposed capital improvement plan totals $591.1 million, of which $82.7 million have been planned for rail car replacement program. The fiscal 2025 proposed budget is estimated at $165.9 million, of which the 3 largest categories are rail projects at 29%, rail car program at 20%, and other projects at 20%. The authority capacity to support its ongoing capital improvement plan depends on the availability of governmental grants, local match funds, and the ability to issue bonds. The authority only goes out for debt when it's required. If projects are financed by debt, the useful life of the asset should exceed the term of the bond. The authority has been awarded various grants through Federal Department of Transportation, State of Ohio Department of Transportation through competitive grant opportunities. The authority also allocate local resources to support local match on grant-funded projects, as well as 100% local fund projects to RTA Capital and Development Fund. The next 5 years, we are anticipating funding levels to be received from the following sources, with majority of the funding coming from federal grant funds at 54.2%, from state funds at 10.8%, from local and local match at 19.5%, and 15.5% for to-be-determined or unfunded projects that are pending competitive grant opportunities. Next, we'll have Mr. Shipper to continue the presentation.
All right. Thanks, Carolyn. I will go into the actual projects by categories. You'll see the impact of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act on the capital program. So we're the way that funding is set up, we're kind of in the 3rd year of the 5-year program with the additional funding. And the Waterfront Line Bridge was certainly a project that benefited from that. We have a number of projects that are under work now that'll continue into next year. We have some projects that will be coming to the board in June and July that will also be continuing into 2025. And then we have our categories of the garages, facilities, rail, other vehicles, and I'll talk about our competitive grants and our unfunded program. Projects that are continuing, right now we've kicked off the design and environmental process for the West 25th Street BRT. There will be a lot of activity of that coming up this summer, and that design will carry into 25. We have a couple projects related to the rail vehicle program, our Central Rail Maintenance Facility, and our Red Line platform modifications. There's going to be, those RFPs are currently out right now. We will have those RFPs received in May. Most likely they'll come to the board in July, but then those design projects will carry out into 2025. On the construction side, 2 major projects that were recently awarded, the Tower City East Portals and the West 117th Street track and platforms. Both of those projects will continue next year. The main office building roof and HVAC repairs, those contracts, we will be receiving bids at the end of May. Most likely they'll come to the board in July. And again, with the long lead items for those, most of that work will happen in 25. And the same thing with some lifts at the Hayden Garage, which will be bidding soon. So as we award things at the end of this year, a lot of other projects will carry on into 25. As we look at the 25, what's going on in 25, we don't have any design contracts for our bus garages, but we do plan on some additional lift contracts and bus wash replacement contracts at both Hayden and Triscuit. In 25, we'll have an RFP for our flyover track that's located near Stokes Boulevard, and a design for the second phase of the Cuyahoga Viaduct. We did the first 5 spans that got us from the western end and across the river a few years ago, and this design will continue towards Tower City. On the construction side, the Brook Park shop improvements are related to the rail program. That design is ongoing right now. Rail service building mezzanine, this is actually separate from the rail program, but a long-awaited project in that building. In this main office building, we're looking at replacing the elevators next year, and we have some track bridge repairs over Brook Park Road that we want to get done before the rail cars come in. Rail projects, on the design side, we have a number of on-calls that are supporting the light rail reconstruction program, and we also will have a project going out to replace 3 rail station platforms on the Red Line. We're going to do the design for all 3, and then we'll phase in the construction later. On the construction side, we're looking at the light rail track program with a project at Shaker Square at the Shaker Junction. The East 79th Street Light Rail Station, that design is now at 60%, so we anticipate that construction for next year. Light rail fiber optic line is also a major project that we will now extend the light rail, the fiber out on the light rail. We now have it completely completed on the Red Line. And a transformer rectifier replacement project at our East 55th Street substation. Some of the other, we were recently awarded a grant for the Lane Corridor TOD, so we are adding that to the capital improvement program, and we anticipate that that RFP will be out about a year from now. We will be issuing the RFP soon for the Broadway corridor, which we won the grant last year for. On the workforce side, the training center at Woodhill will be built next year, as well as a number of bus shelter upgrades where we just received a grant award from the state of Ohio. When it comes to our vehicle program, we have a current contract for 60-foot vehicles. There's still 40 option vehicles left on that. We will be coming to the board later this year to exercise those options. With the lead times for buses, those buses will show up at the end of 25 or early 26, depending on the timing of what manufacturing slot we can get into. But we do have the funding in a current grant that will be executed in the next couple months, which will allow us to purchase off the options 40-foot vehicles. We have a separate contract for up to 8 60-foot CNG buses, which will be coming forward. And then we'll have a separate contract for 10 paratransit vehicles. We have 20 that we're in the process of accepting right now. On the railcar program, our large grant has been executed. We will be coming to the board later this year to exercise more options on that project. We still have up to 30 options available, and we have a clause in the contract that will allow us to get a better pricing if we have a very large number on this option. So we're trying to figure out what we want to bring to the board this fall for additional rail cars. When it comes to unfunded, $236 million. For the new board members, this is the lowest number we've ever had. So it's a large number, but because of the IIJA and some of the competitive grants we've won, we've been able to knock this down quite a bit. We were close to $500 million not too many years ago. A big item on that, which I've highlighted, is on the rail vehicle replacement program. We have received commitments of $363 million of the $393. So that number is down to 30, and we are going to whittle away at that last $30 million. That's about 6 vehicles worth of funding. Other areas, again, we have unfunded needs that are kind of scattered all over the authority, whether it's rail facilities. Track rehabilitation on the light rail is still a big item. Our rail signal system, bus vehicles, this is probably the lowest number we've also been on the bus side. Technical support and hardware for the technology side, we still have some unfunded needs. We have bus and rail facility and yard work. Most of that's in the rail yard. Bridges, stations, and equipment, again, we have some unfunded projects in that area. And then on the Metro Health, we still will be pursuing a small starts grant for that $20 million, but the timing is such that we won't be putting that application until the end of the year. So that still remains unfunded.
Hey, Mike, real quick, I'm sorry. Yeah. Can you mention what our deficit used to be?
It was like pretty close to $500 million, not too many years ago. And last year when I presented, I think we were at 292. So, you know, the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, I mean, that gave us, I'll talk about that. I'll talk about that right now. Because the IIJA, Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, what it does, it has 2 components. There's one component which is basically guaranteed funding, which is our formula grants. And that guaranteed funding plus our match of that is total $70 million a year. And that's a $16 million increase from what it used to be for 5 years. So for this, 25, 26, and 27, the way our capital program is set up, that boost is still there in the 25, 26, and 27. When that act expires, it could drop back down to the old FAST Act numbers. So for 28 and 29, we have a lower level in the capital improvement program, but that provides our base. IIJA also has a number of competitive grant programs, such as the Railcar program, the All Station Access program, and that has been able to allow us to bring in significant additional funding through that program. So that's one level. From the state level, the state of Ohio allocates through the state legislature $70 million a year for transit throughout the whole state. Of that 70 million, we usually get 12 to 15, but we have to compete for it. So it's not guaranteed. There's only 4 million of that that's kind of guaranteed through a formula. Last year, the state legislature also approved a $15 million workforce mobility program for the state. It's a 2-year program. We just received $400,000 out of the first piece of that program, and we will be applying for more. That program may or may not be there. It's a 2-year kind of pilot program. And then we compete for all kinds of other grants, and that's how we build the capital program up to the level that Carolyn presented. When it came to grants last year, we had a great year. Obviously, we won the big grant, but we also, these 6 grants, we got some ODOT Urban Transit Program money. We got some NWACA money for paratransit vehicles. The big rail car grant, which has now been turned into real money. It takes about a year to actually execute these. Ohio ODOT, we got $12.4 on the Ohio Transit Preservation Partnership. And that's a program they can only allocate 1 year at a time, so we're going to keep going back to ODOT for that program. And Metro Health, ODOT through their track program awarded $12 million, and that money is available in 2025. And that will help leverage us for the money that we're going to be requesting from FTA in the Small Starts program. The total is 162.5. what's noted is we're trying to do $35 million a year, and even if you take away the big grant, we were pretty close to that $35 million in competitive grants last year. This year, we have a lot of the same programs that we're submitting. We have a few that we didn't win last year that we're submitting again this year. So on the bus side, we just submitted the low no emission grant for 10 electric vehicles and 3 charging stations. The ODOT UTP, that application is in again. NOACA will be submitting for $900,000 of 5310. On the rail car, we made a submission for $6.5 million for the OTP2, or the Ohio Transit Preservation Program. We were awarded 8.3. And then there's a ADA program for all station accessibility. We submitted a $16 million grant for the 8 stations on the Blue Line. We should find out shortly if we're successful. On the track side, again, we have a lot of unfunded track reconstruction, so we're going to go back to the ODOT track again. We also turned in community funding and congressionally directed spending requests of $3 million, both to Senator Brown and Representative Brown, and those have been submitted. On the workforce development side, we turned in about $1 million request to Senator Brown's office earlier this year, and we will be turning in another $2 million request to the ODOT mobility program. And so far this year, because of some timing, we got some grant awards for things we applied for last year, early this year. We've already received $25 million in grants in 2024 from things that we've been pursuing. So that's been really good. We've had a pretty good start to this year. And with that, we can take questions, both Carolyn and myself.
Thank you so much for that. Questions from the committee or the board as a whole?
Thank you for the presentation this morning. This is really helpful and I think provided a pretty extensive overview. Just some kind of initial clarification, like those percentages at the beginning, the ranking criteria, is that sort of committee driven? Is that sort of GCRTA leadership priority? Just kind of, could you help me understand like those strategic priorities, how they are determined, and then also the, the percentages?
So years ago, when according to FTA, we had to come up with some guidelines on how to select our capital projects to actually go into the capital program. Based on the criteria that you see listed here, these were the 6 that impact our ongoing services or infrastructure heavily. So the committee and the CEO, executive management team came up with these criteria. So when we look at the state of good repair, we want to make sure that the funding that we're receiving from federal government, that we're maintaining those assets on a regular basis. That's one of their major requirements that they have in place for us. So that's why it's weighted so heavily compared to the other ones.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And at any point in time, are those categories or percentages revisited?
Yes, actually, the state of good repair was actually revisited probably about 5 years ago when I'm trying to remember, MAP 21 was put in place by FTA, where they actually required us to install a software system to go out and assess all of our assets and ensure that we're maintaining those in a state of good repair based on their standards.
Thank you.
I'll piggyback for a second. We also anticipated this question coming, so I appreciate all of the good ones. I will say that I wanted to make note that environmental impact is the 5% as well, and we have a lot of changes going on in the way that we do business and the way that we purchase different vehicle types, as well as fueling options and impacts on idling, and there's a lot of different ways that can adjust through the industry. So I think that while we want to make sure, as Carolyn mentioned and Mike mentioned, that we keep a steady sort of ranking criteria so that we're not too all over the place, it is worth going back from time to time to look at the percentages when significant changes impact, for example, electrification of vehicles, right? That's going to change the environmental impact that our vehicles have on the community. So I think that as we start to make major changes in some of our infrastructure, we'll go back and review this and come back to the board just as an FYI as well to make sure that we're current.
Yeah, that would be helpful, and perhaps it would be even an opportunity to have that understanding, prior to the next capital, review, if possible.
Sure, absolutely. And a lot of the government mandates are also driving a lot of this too, with the 20, as Mike chuckles, as a lot of this comes down. So example, the IIJA and different kind of infrastructure packages that are out there. So we have to remain nimble, but never do we want the board to get the impression that we're kind of reducing our emphasis in certain areas. Another thing to think about, excuse me, I'm sorry, as Carolyn mentioned, state of good repair is also going to drive us when we're in years of replacement. And then also the ridership is going to adjust as well, hopefully with a lot of the things that we have going on with traction to bring people back, and the kind of work play dynamic that people have now will be on the upswing. So some of those numbers can be massaged as well.
Trustee Marsman or Trustee Sleesman?
Related, comment question. I was flipping through the budget book in anticipation of this meeting, and I noted that even though we have these ranking criteria in terms of priorities, the spending is lined up as 92+% as state of good repair spending. And I'll let you comment, but my inference to that was we were that far behind on state of good repair maintenance, and we have to do a good bit of work, and we have done a good bit of work in the last few years and have to do some more to get up to a good state of repair.
Yes. Yes. That's why it's so, I think it's so important that we really have to advocate for proper level investment. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act was years and years coming, but it was only 5 years. And even on the federal side, it's kind of not paid for. And the way they structured it, it's only set up at 5 years, and it's kind of extra money on top of the old FAST Act. So it's really important that we're showing, because of that extra, we are addressing a huge state of good repair problem. Our rail vehicles are the oldest vehicles in the country, oldest fleet in the country. Because of the IIJA, we're taking care of that. Our buses are not bad, and we've done a really good job of flattening out our bus replacement curve. But a lot of the money that we've won in grants are related to buses and rail cars, and we're trying to get that vehicle fleet back to that state of good repair level, and it's pretty expensive. The track is the same way. Our percentage of slow zones is much higher than it should be. So as we fix the track and get rid of those slow zones, it's going to make our rail service that much more reliable. And when we couple that with the train, with the new rail vehicles, it's huge. So, because we're behind, we're not in an expansion mode. And that's kind of part of that, the way our capital program is set up is, at one time we had goals to have 20% of our money in expansion and 80% of it in state of good repair. But if we're not keeping up on the state of good repair, we can't really be in an expansion mode. So we've really shifted. An FTA with our, we have a transit asset maintenance plan, a TAMP plan that we have to turn in and monitor every year. And that's why state of good repair is such a big deal. We got to take care of what we have. And it's not that we're negligent, but when you have what was close to $500 million backlog, we're picking and choosing the worst things. And, fortunately, we're taking care of the very worst thing we have with the rail car. That is by far the worst piece of, worse vehicles and worse, impact to our ability to deliver really good service. And it's been a big lift. And but it's important that we don't stop there. So we're still working with ODOT. We're still trying to get that last 30 million. And the advocacy at the state level is really important too. I mean, the state of Ohio at $70 million a year for the whole state, that's $7 a person. And that 70 was better than the 40 that we had a few years ago, and it was better than the 17 we had one year. But it's not even close. So, we'll be advocating for that 70 to go to 100. And hopefully the 12 to 15 million we get out of that program would proportionally grow also. So, yeah, it's a challenge.
Thanks.
But we're doing our best, and we are, right now we're on the right trajectory.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I agree with Trustee Love that the background was really helpful. Appreciate all of the details of how projects are selected and ranked and vetted. This is a very robust capital program, so congratulations to you guys. Thank you for pursuing opportunities aggressively and investing across so many facets of our capital assets. I have a short list of questions I'll try and go through relatively quickly. So going back to the state of good repair conversation, I'm really glad to see that sustained investment in bus vehicles and obviously the rail car replacements we've been talking about. There's also station investments in the list here. And you mentioned track investment and slow zones. And I'm curious, probably not today, but maybe going forward, if we could get a clearer picture of how investments this year, next year, et cetera, as the new rail cars are coming online, how investments in the track line up with that and where we have key gaps that we might want to strategize around closing as the new rail cars come in. So I'm thinking, as we have new vehicles, that's a really nice rider experience, but if they're slow all the time, that's a detractor, right? Like we want new cars that can move quickly, that go to stations that are well repaired. And so just any gaps that we have in our existing funding and that timeline, I'd be really interested in digging into and talking about how to close.
And well, I can give you a short answer of that. The red line is in really good shape, and we've invested, we quietly invested probably $65 million over a 6 or 7 year period on the Red Line West. And some of that funded by ODOT, some funded by FTA. Recently, we upgraded the trunk line on the light rail out to Shaker Square. That's in great shape. But the two legs, the blue line and green line legs from Shaker Square out, that's our biggest gap when it comes to track funding, a track replacement program. We have a $70 million program. We're about 30 million short of that. And then we also know down the road there's some things that we're going to need to do on the red line at the east end, but that's a few years out. But the critical piece that's missing really is the light rail, because it really is important. It'll be really important for us to get those legs upgraded to the same standard we have on the red line, because the new vehicles have the ability to run on everything. So we don't have two separate fleets. So these vehicles are going to go all over the place, all over the system. We want to make sure that we get that track up to that same standard on the light rail. So that's a huge push for us.
Thank you. My next question is about the state level funding. I know we've talked about $70 million annually for transit, and in some of the competitive grants you listed out, there were different ODOT pots of funding that we're tapping. Mm-hmm. Are those ODOT buckets part of that $70 million, or are those separate?
Yes. When we get to, right now, usually there were 2 pots, but now there's 3 when they added this $15 million mobility program. So of the 70, there's 2 pots. There's the urban transit program, UTP. Usually we get about 4 million out of that program. That's a formula for the urban transit. And that total program is like 14 million of the 70. Another piece of that is the Ohio Transit Preservation Program, the OTP2. That program is in the 30-some million range, and we've been getting between 8 and 12 out of that. And we've been targeting that program for rail car. So some years they'll fund 2 cars, some years they'll fund 3 cars at 80% of the cost of the car. And then the rest of that is really set up for the mid-size and smaller transit properties throughout the state. So there's 70-some different transit properties around the state. So for us, it's really important to advocate to get that 70 to make the next step to 100, and the next transportation budget will be next spring. So that's something we're trying to lay the groundwork for now. And certainly any help we can get to continue that push is really important, whether it's through the Ohio Transit Association, ourselves, and some other supporters. The $15 million that ODOT has, that's a new program that the legislature added to look at kind of different ways of solving that, some cross-county issues, and some of the urban, ex-urban, reverse commute. Unfortunately, so there's a cross-county piece. So we're looking at something between us and Lorain County as part of an application. There's also an intra-county piece. So as we've been working with our microtransit pilots and other things, that we know we have these work centers that are on the periphery that are really hard for us to serve with regular bus service. Very expensive to serve with regular bus. So this program is to look at some ways of providing some funding to try to address some of the workforce disparity between work centers and where employees live. And we'll see where that program goes. It's a 2-year program. And that was brand new this year.
Thank you. I have 2 more questions. One is just around the sources of local funding, local match. We talked about sales and use tax and bonds. At this point, is it right that we don't have bonds in the mix? We're solely relying on sales and use tax?
You can answer that.
So at the end of 2023, our current debt level was set at $330 million, where we ended the year. We're looking to pay off at least $7 million this year in principal. So right now, we still have a fund balance in municipal bonds.
Thank you. And then my last question is around station repairs. I'm familiar with the staircase at the West 65th Lorain station that has been gated off for some time, and I'm sure there are things like that at other rail stations as well. I'm just curious where those are falling in this, what might be included for repair this year, and what is in the desired but unfunded bucket.
Yeah. Actually, West 65th, we had an unsuccessful bid for that project. So we're in the process of repackaging that, and probably will have it out again in about a month. So that one is one we're working on. The next big one is East 79th on the light rail. That is fully funded, so that's good. The next one after that is some work at West 25th. We're looking at the second stair elevator core, as well as some improvements to the facility itself. And then we also have another project out at Windermere that we're looking at to do some repairs out at Windermere. So that's kind of the order we're in right now, as well as the end of the Blue Line. We still have a huge project that we've are which we're accumulating the money for. We have a project that's routing now that should be bidding later this year out at the end of the blue line.
Yes. Trustee.
Sorry. Oh, do you want? No, go ahead. You sure? Okay. I'm sorry. I just have two more, and I'll lump them together, and you can answer them however you think appropriate. So my first one is just generally in terms of unfunded projects. Where do you think the biggest risk is? What are you keeping an eye on in terms of like the federal, state, local mix? Just understanding the political environment is uncertain, and you're going out 5 years, so I'm just interested in that. And then my second question is related to whether, as you look at the whole portfolio of projects, if there's any type of assessment about population or geographic impacts of the various investments in the aggregate. I'm just interested in how we are thinking about investments and also communicating where we are making investments.
Yeah, I think I'll answer that part first. We are tracking, we are doing a tracking now of, it's more on an annual basis, not total program, but of the major projects that we're awarding, all the projects over $1 million, we are tracking their impact on environmental justice locations within Cuyahoga County. I think last year of that spend, 77% of that spend hit a environmental justice community. So that was either a high minority or high poverty or both. We have a lot of boths.
Sorry, can you repeat that percentage again?
That was 77% of that, of the major contracts awarded last year. Our projection for this year is also still in the 70s. Although we did award a major contract in an area that only had 50%, which was the Tower City Portals, which is downtown. So we have a number of projects that are 100%. We'll see how many of them get awarded. But we are looking at that from an environmental justice standpoint. And that was important even when the next gen bus system was put into place, how the additional frequency of some of those routes hit the EJ zones. So we do look at that. When it comes to some of the unfunded stuff, I think our biggest risk on the unfunded is the fact that we've been successful winning money. And that's kind of the feedback we've been getting from some of our potential grant sources or other sources is, hey, you guys just won something, why, maybe it's somebody else's turn. There is some of that. So that's a risk. It's certainly a risk that we've had also at the State House because, and that's some of the things we're trying to overcome and trying to get that 70 million higher. It says, well, why does transit need more money? Because, you're getting more money out of the IIJA, or everyone is as a base level. So why should we add money to that? So there is some risk in being successful. And so we have to work on education on how, how the IIJA is going to actually run out. And again, showing what we're doing with it. So the waterfront line, done. Lots of rail cars, lots of buses, and lots of other projects. Almost every project that we're doing, almost every project we're doing is funded out of the IIJA. So those are things that are important. If one problem with having things that are unfunded, you get into this issue between, maintaining a really old asset and replacing it, and the big risk is waiting too long to replace. So far we've been okay, but there's always a risk that we have something in the pipeline and maybe we're 6 months later than we should have been, or a year later than we should have been. So there's always a risk that something could happen because we didn't fund it last year. So that's always a risk.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Very good
One
questions.
side question. I know the Triscuit escalators were down. Is that more of a minor repair, or is that something that's going to need more work?
Oh, gosh. That is, right now, that is covered under the, it's more out, it's not in this part of our program, but it is covered in our new elevator escalator maintenance contract. So that one should be taken care of out of that. But in the capital program, we do know that some elevators need replacement. So the main office and the one at Windermere, we know we need to replace those. So those are in the capital program because that's outside of that contract.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to suspend the committee meeting?
Motion?
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
Any opposed? The ayes carry. We are now going to open this up for the public hearing. If you can read the budget statement, please. Thank you.
Yes. This is the official public hearing on the proposed capital improvement budget for fiscal year 2025 for the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority. As required by the Ohio Revised Code, the information concerning the fiscal 2025 capital improvement budget is available for public inspection in the Office of Management and Budget of this authority. Public notice of this hearing was given by publication of legal advertisement in the Cleveland Urban News on April 19th, 20th, and 21st of 2024, and in the Cleveland Plain Dealer on April 17th and 19th, 2024, as well as by posting of notice in the first floor lobby of the authority's main office building, at Customer Service Center in Tower City Rotunda, RTA Facebook page, Twitter page, and on the authority's website. The capital improvement plan document was available for review upon request at least 2 weeks in advance. Notification was given on these sites on how to virtually attend the committee meeting, public hearing, and board meeting, and how to submit a comment for public hearing. The fiscal 2025 capital improvement plan was presented to the Operational Planning and Infrastructure Committee of the RTA Board of Trustees on Tuesday, May 7th, 2024, and will request that the fiscal 2025-2029 capital improvement plan be recommended to the full board for approval on May 21st, 2024. The capital improvement budget process was started in September 2023, where a request was submitted for review. The projects were then reviewed by the authority's Capital Program Working Group and the Capital Program Oversight Committee. The fiscal 2025 through 2029 capital improvement plan was completed in April 2024 to comply with NOACA project planning review schedule. This ensures that the funding will be aligned with the program budget. If any adjustments are needed, they will be made and considered by the board at the appropriate time. The fiscal 2025 through 2029 capital improvement plan totals $591 million, of which $166 million is budgeted for fiscal 2025. The authority focus continued to be on replacement of rail vehicles and rail infrastructure projects. The 2025 to 2029 capital improvement plan includes projects that are fully funded, where funding sources are yet to be determined. Unfunded projects total approximately $236 million, which includes the rail car replacement program, where the local match has been reserved, but total federal funding has not been identified. Sales tax is the funding source for 100% locally funded projects, as well as local match for federal and state awards. The authority financial goal is to transfer a minimum of 10% of annual sales tax receipts to the capital improvement program. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any in-person comments that are specific to the capital improvement plan? Do we have any over the phone, Teresa?
In the back, do we have any calls?
There are no calls.
Okay, there are no calls, and there are no comments in the email.
Okay, thank you so much. So now we're going to have the recommendation to move forward for the Capital Improvement Fund budget to the full board. But before we do that, we're going to, did you have a comment, President? We're going to make a motion to reconvene the committee meeting. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the ayes carry. We will move forward with the last presentation for the budget and the recommendation.
Staff recommend that the Operational Planning and Infrastructure Committee present the resolution to the full board for approval of our fiscal 2025 to 2029 Capital Improvement Fund budget.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The FY 2025 and 2029 Capital Improvement Fund budget will now move to the full board. Thank you so much for that presentation.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion to suspend or move out of this committee meeting?
To adjourn. A motion.
Or adjourn, motion to adjourn. Thank you, Teresa.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, this meeting is now adjourned.
I'd like to call the order the RTA Committee of the Whole. Roll call, please.
Mayor Kumar,
Here.
Ms. Welch,
Here.
Mayor Biassiata, Mr. Love,
Here.
Reverend Lucas, Ms. McPherson, Ms. Mersman,
Here.
Ms. Pachetti,
Here.
Mr. Sleesman,
Here.
and Mayor Weiss. You have 6 committee members present. You have a quorum.
Great, thank you very much. Today we have an update on the code book, and we have Dawn Tarka, Associate Counsel, will be presenting. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Today, we're here to discuss a few provisions related to the board's real estate policies. By way of background, the board's policies were codified in 1989. We're currently doing a review, and we're updating the policies to bring them in line with current operations. These policies are subject to review and revision every 3 years. And generally, the legal department works with subject matter experts throughout the authority for the purpose of updating these policies. The recommendations are not simply ideas coming from your lawyers. There's some substantive input. And on that note, today we're talking about the real estate policies. I'm going to invite our senior real estate manager to join me, Jim Rusnoff.
Thank you, Dawn. Board President Kumar, members of the Committee of the Whole. I'm Jim Rusnoff, Real Estate Manager. Before I discuss specific policy modifications presented for your consideration today, I want to reemphasize the comment Dawn just made, that most real estate policy modifications presented for board review result from a collaborative effort between our legal division, real estate personnel, operations, and other internal input as required. We often submit modification requests and edits to the original policy documents simply to improve definition and clarity within the policy statements. Substantive change recommendations result from a collaborative effort. This is an ongoing effort during our recurring real estate policy and procedure reviews. For consideration today, the request is to increase the compensation threshold for a permanent easement requiring board authorization for an amount that exceeds $10,000. A permanent easement valued at $10,000 or less is to be authorized by administrative action. The threshold currently is set at $2,500 as established in 2004. With evolving market conditions, the reality is there are few permanent easements valued at less than $10,000 today. If they are valued at less than $10,000, they are typically very basic requests or a request to modify an existing easement due to changes in technology, equipment, or access and service requirements. A $10,000 threshold would more accurately reflect current real estate industry standard compensation for this type of an easement. I can report that over the previous 8 years or so, I don't recall seeing a permanent easement transaction that was valued at less than $10,000 between our typical relationships, RTA, utility companies, and other government entities such as city, county, state, sewer district, or the Port Authority. Conversely, we are not recommending any modification to the board approval requirement established in 2004 of the threshold amounts for lease, license, limited use, or joint development agreements. Currently, compensation that exceeds $25,000 or a term of more than 3 years requires board authorization. These types of agreements are varied in nature and often complex, but are presented to the board at a very manageable volume, so that we felt it best practice to keep the current review and authorization process intact. The modifications that Dawn Tarka will present regarding these agreements will offer improved clarity and definition to Chapter 470, our real estate policy statement, without requesting a substantive change. I'll return the lectern to Dawn Tarka for these additional details.
Thank you, Jim. We have several different provisions that we're going to discuss today, all of which relate to RTA's real estate. The first I'd like to present is Chapter 1066, currently titled Promotional Activities. The proposal is to repeal this chapter and to move the content of this chapter to Section 470, where a new section is proposed, 470.10, with a new title, Use of Authority Facilities for Special Events. There's only one substantive change in the language, and that is in Section 470.10D9. Currently, the language does not allow the authority to permit on-site, on-authority property ticket sales. The new language is added to give the authority the option or the opportunity that if we should want to permit ticket sales, we can. And all of the detailed changes are in the red lines in your board packets. For Chapter 1094, the newspaper dispensing box policy, we are also recommending to repeal this. The program that allowed newspapers to place newspaper boxes on the authority property have been discontinued. These newspaper boxes are those metal boxes that you sometimes see on street corners. They used to be very frequently located, particularly at our transit stations. Since nowadays people don't read paper newspapers quite so much, there's been no need to continue the program, and therefore we're recommending that the policy be repealed. Now we come to Chapter 470. There are some editing changes, first of all, to correct the title of the general manager, and for those shorter term agreements that Jim mentioned, leases, temporary easements, license agreements, and limited use agreements, we're simply clarifying the language. We're not making any change in the threshold. The language will make it clear that board approval is required for agreements that either exceed $25,000 or a term of 3 years. Board approval is not required for an agreement of $25,000 or less, and it's also not required for a term of 3 years or less. So if an agreement has, the value is $25,000 or say $24,000 and the term is 2 years, the policy does not require that to be presented to the board. However, if you had an agreement that is worth $26,000 and has a term of 2 years, that would come to the board because it has either $25,000 or a term of 3 years or more. For permanent easements, and this is the other item for which Jim gave a little bit of background, the board approval is required for easements with a value of more than $10,000. That's the proposal, and it's being proposed to be increased from $2,500. It would not be required for easements that have a value of $10,000 or less. Then we're proposing to add one new section, 470.11, and this goes back to one provision in the newspaper dispensing box policy. That provision allowed the authority to remove boxes that are not in compliance with the policy. This added provision would give the authority the ability to remove items that are left on authority property without the authority's permission. And it points to our procurement policies that would give us the ability to sell or otherwise dispose of abandoned property. And this policy is separate and apart from the lost and found policy, which if you lose something on a bus or a train, you can go to the lost and found and retrieve that property. But this is for abandoned items that do not have permission to be placed on authority property. The last provision we'll discuss is Chapter 850. This relates to public assembly on authority property. We've updated the wording in a couple places to better align with First Amendment principles, and we updated the reference to the new section 470.10. Staff requests that the Committee of the Whole recommend these provisions to the Board of Trustees for approval. Are there any questions?
Yes, Trustee Versman.
Thank you for the presentation. For the real estate policies, I'm curious how we set the value for transactions or how we establish that dollar amount.
Thank you, Trustee. The $10,000 threshold requirement, I think, is reflective of current market conditions, meaning in the past we had in 2004, $2,500 seemed to be a reasonable amount. Currently, I believe $10,000 is a relatively low amount for permanent easement costs. So most of the easements will continue to be presented to the board.
Okay, let me clarify. Sorry, I didn't state clearly. For any specific real estate transaction, do we use the market value of that property as the price? Is there some discretion in setting that dollar amount for a specific transaction to determine whether it would be like $24,000 or $26,000 or $100,000?
Sorry, before you answer, and just to make sure I understand, I think the question also is just general, you're talking about general real estate kind of valuation practices to be able to look at market value prior to negotiation for a real estate transaction?
Yes. How do we set the price for a specific real estate transaction?
So perhaps the review process that you go through in a bite-sized portion to be able to review how you create that proposal for value.
I also think the question deals with kind of an apples and oranges comparison as well. For most market transactions, we require MAI appraised value, whether an asset's being disposed of or acquired. In the case of fees charged for easements or other licensing requirements, I do a survey and I constantly inquire with city, county, state, other entities like sewer district and the Port Authority, and sort of gauge what the market charges are for these types of arrangements now. So we adjust according to market trends.
Thank you. My next question is about the 470.10. I noticed that the regulations don't allow food or alcoholic beverages to be sold on premises at any time, and I'm just curious if there was discussion about allowing that at the discretion of the authority as well. I can imagine for a special event like a community event, they may want to have a food truck or something like that. I'm just kind of curious about the discussion around that.
So I'll weigh in on that one just from a high level, and then Janet, if you have anything from the legal advisory. I can speak for the time that I've been here, not in previous years, but typically we try to realign, and then Natoya as well, we realign a lot of what we do according to our mission statement. The advertising guidelines are a good example of that. We've actually gone back and created advertising guidelines to be able to address those type of issues. So for example, I believe, and Doc, you might correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a particular question about I think it was Crown Royal, if I'm not mistaken, for an advertising of liquor on our services at some point in time prior to my arrival. And the decision that I would agree with at this point would be no regarding allowance of that kind of advertising of alcoholic beverages, because it didn't align with our mission and vision. So we really hold fast to that. I can recall one request that came in since I've been here to have alcohol on a special event, sponsored event on property, and the answer was also no. So I would say we generally do not make exceptions for that because of just the misalignment with our general mission and vision. And I would think that that would also be the case with our properties, but I can't recall offhand any situation where we would create that exception. Janet, I don't know if there's any additional information from a legal perspective on that.
Thank you. The only thing I want to add is that when you allow alcoholic beverages as well as food to be sold on your property, you create an additional liability for the conduct of individuals buying and selling those items, and you are required to have additional supervision and monitoring. So it from a legal standpoint, it does save us from exposure and risk by not having those items sold on our property.
Thank you. I understand the considerations with alcohol specifically. My reading of this policy would allow alcohol to be served but not sold, providing that the appropriate permits and approvals are in place. But also, Section D11 says that no food or alcoholic beverages are to be sold on the premises at any time. So kind of setting aside the alcoholic piece, just wonder if there is a desire for the authority to have some discretion on the sale of food or things outside of alcohol that present less risk but benefit for people attending an event. Just something to think about before this gets passed by the whole board. I also noticed there's a couple of instances of just general manager terminology in here that we may want to add the chief executive officer term to in line with the general cleanup. And then my final question is around the items left on authority property, understanding that it doesn't apply to lost and found, but I'm wondering if there's an abandoned car or a bicycle at a bike rack or things like that, does this provision apply to that? And do we have a certain amount of time that it can be there after which we determine that it is in fact abandoned? And does this address that type of situation?
There is no express language in the provision that states a time period. It's understood that we would, of course, use a reasonable time period.
If you're asking about bicycles, if you look under 470.11 at the end on the next page, that does not apply to lost and found items. So if you're asking about bicycle, was that your question?
Sure. I think there's there's a point at which something goes from lost and found to abandoned, right?
A certain time period, yes.
Yes. And so I was just wondering if the agency has a policy around that time period, if our transit police impound things after a certain time period, or how that is dealt with our policies.
Go ahead, Dawn, if you had any information on the exact time frame, but just to give a good example, I'm looking at Natoya and then Chief Jones. We've actually gone through a process, I want to say within the last year and a half, of our entire lost and found bike inventory. And if you could give a quick informational on the time frame. Perhaps that was looked at with that. And I think, Dawn, you might have helped with that as well, that initiative, but I'm not sure.
Good morning. I know with regard to bike inventory, we are looking at bicycles that have been confiscated, whether they've been lost or whether their owners have been involved in criminal activity, and the cases have gone to court. We do have some bicycles in our inventory that we've had for at least 12 years. We are looking at the disposition of those court cases now, and the goal is to try and locate an owner for those bikes. If we're unable to locate the owner, then we have to decide, and I think we'll work with Natoya to decide, or Dr. Walker-Minor to decide what to do with those bikes.
Good morning. Last year, we actually worked through procurement and legal, and what we did was there were about, was it Bob, 70 bicycles that were contributed to the bike co-op?
Yes.
And those bicycles had been on property for a number of years. It's a year later, and we have bicycles on the property, and we will engage the same process, legal procurement, and then a bike co-op. And in that way, it protects the agency because we are not identifying my pet project or your pet project for the bicycles. The bicycles go through a process with a commitment that they are contributed to youth who, but for the co-op, would not have a bicycle.
Mine is more a comment to build off of what Trustee Mersman was speaking to. I would love to see the special events information somehow land on the COC or CAC committee, just to, once this passes, just to bring it to the forefront. I think there are a lot of groups within Northeast Ohio who happen to host events on GCRTA properties. Sometimes it's just donuts and whatever. I would like to see that there is some collaboration and that they understand, right, that this is a collaborative effort and not a policing effort, right? Because I'm with you on the language, right? And it's the accessibility thing. Sometimes language can sometimes be viewed a different way. And I think sometimes the community groups that we often experience are thinking, oh, they're going to police our actions. And I think this is more of like, if you're going to do it on our property for the protection and safety of the individuals who are involved in these events, we need to make sure that there is some collaboration in how you are having those events on our property. And so I think the CAC committee, I know Trustee McPherson is not here, but would love to see that passed along to them so that they can also speak to the community about, hey, if you're going to do this thing on GCRTA property, these are the measurements that are in place. We want to be able to work with you on those items. We're not going to obviously keep you away from us. We just want to be collaborative. So I just wanted to comment on that as well. I think that CAC would be helpful in establishing that.
So I could just chime in just quickly. Under the CAC, and we certainly have a member here represented today, we have a number of committees, 3 committees specifically, education and advocacy, ADA and rules, and I'm sure AJ, who is the board liaison for the CAC, is listening, but if he's not, I certainly will take it back to him because I think that this could fall under education and advocacy around how we do in coordination with, to the point that Janet mentioned, we always are thinking about liability, and so that becomes front of mind, frontal lobe, if you will, as we think about what it is that we do.
That's great. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I want to thank the board for their input. If there are some specific items or verbiage that you would like to talk with us about, feel free to reach out to me and we can certainly address those concerns. But we appreciate the feedback you're giving us.
Any final questions on that? Don, you'd be looking for a motion to move this to the full board?
We request I'm sorry, apologize.
That's okay. Great. So given the conversation, I guess I would say if there's a motion to move this to the full board for approval, pending maybe the discretion of the general manager to make some slight adjustments relative to the comments on food and some of these other items. And then I would just ask if any of those changes are made as it comes for the board, if we could just have those highlighted from the version that we have so we know what changes were made. But I don't think they're going to be substantive enough to hold us up, and just having management take that under advisement. Is there such a motion?
Motion Welch.
Second, Mersman.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much for your presentation, complete as always. And then next, we have an executive session requested to enable the board to conference with GCRTA attorneys for information gathering, fact-finding, and to receive legal advice. Conferences with an attorney for the public body concerning disputes involving the public body that are subject to pending or imminent court action. Is there such a motion?
Motion Welch.
Second, Sleesman.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Kumar,
Yes.
Mr. Love,
Yes.
Ms. Mersman,
Yes.
Ms. Pachetti,
Yes.
Mr. Sleesman,
Yes.
and Ms. Welch.
Yes.
You have 6 ayes and none opposed.
Great. The board is going to go back in the committee room. Is that okay? How many people?
Folks, please stay for the executive.
think we're getting ready to come out.
Let me just tell me you're going. I will go.
And then this is for
Okay.
Yeah, you guys got the ink.
Okay. Is there any cost on it?
No, there's no cost.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn from executive session?
Motion Welch.
Second, Mersman.
Okay, great. Roll call, please.
Okay, Mayor Kumar,
Yes.
Mr. Love,
Yes.
Ms. Mersman,
Yes.
Ms. Pachetti,
Yes.
Mr. Sleesman,
Yes.
and Ms. Welch.
Yes.
You have 6 ayes and none opposed. You're good. You just need to adjourn.
I'm going to make a motion to adjourn the regular session. Is there a second?
Second, Mersman.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned.